So our next presenting company is Mesoblast, which really is arguably one of the leading cell therapy companies in the world, with TEMCELL product recently approved by partner JCR in Japan to treat acute graft versus host disease. Mesoblast is conducting a phase 3 trial of MPC 150IM in heart failure, which recently passed an important interim futility analysis. Mesoblast is also in the process of negotiating a partnership with Mallinckrodt for both MSC 100 IV for graft versus host disease and also MPC 06 ID for chronic lower back pain. The company recently reported positive phase 2 data for MPC 300 IV in refractory rheumatoid arthritis that I thought looked really impressive. So here to discuss the Mesoblast story with me is Michael Schuster, who heads up Pharma Partnering. Michael, thanks so much. It's been a long time we've known each other. I'm pleased to see the progress you guys are making. So a lot of ground to cover in 13 and a half minutes. Let's start right off on the ongoing phase 3 trial of MPC 150 IM in heart failure. The trial recently passed an interim futility analysis. Maybe you can walk us through the design of this trial and tell us what that milestone means for the program.
Sure. The heart failure program is one of our lead applications. And before we got to phase 3, we did extensive preclinical studies and a phase 2 trial that demonstrated some pretty impressive findings. Let me just skip to this slide. So we did a 60-patient randomized controlled trial in really the sickest class of heart failure patients, class 2B3 patients who are at high risk of heart failure hospitalization and cardiac death. And we directly administered our cells in a dose escalation manner directly into the heart using a direct intracardiac catheter. And what we showed is that over a period of time, as early as 6 months, that there's improvements in the heart's function. There is significant improvement in volume reduction in both systolic and diastolic volume, as well as improvement in quality of life parameters and 6-minute walk. But what the payers, the patients, and the FDA cares about is the hard endpoints: heart failure, hospitalization, and cardiac death. And what we show here, over a 3-year period, the highest dose, patients that received the highest dose of 150 million cells, no one died and no one went to the hospital, compared to a 33% event rate in the controls. And when we looked at even the sickest subset of patients, these effects were even more pronounced. And that formed the basis for us to advance into phase 3. This trial is a 600-patient trial with a similar patient population, really enriched for having these events. And the goal is really to prevent this progressive decline and actually to show improvement in patients. And the primary endpoint is trying to show a reduction in reoccurring heart failure hospitalizations and an impact of cardiac mortality. And what we've shown through an interim analysis of futility is that the DSMB reviewed the data in an unblinded manner, and we were successfully able to pass this bar. And it demonstrates biological activity, and the DSMB allowed us to continue the trial without any changes.
That's great. And when could we get final data from the phase 3? And maybe you can remind us the size and powering of that big phase 3 study.
Yeah, this is a 600-patient trial. It's an event-driven trial. So ultimately, when a pre-specified number of events has occurred, the trial will stop. We anticipate enrolling approximately 600 patients and having approximately 6 months to 1 year follow-up to achieve that outcome. We should be in a position to complete recruitment next year and have results in around 2019.
Great. Excellent. That's really helpful.
And on top of that, we have an additional trial in class 4 patients who receive a left ventricular assist device. This is a study sponsored by the NIH. We originally did a 30-patient study, 20 treated, 10 controls. There were no deaths in the treated group at 90 days, which was the primary endpoint, compared to a 30% mortality rate in the controls. Furthermore, 50% of the treated patients were able to tolerate turning off or weaning the patients from this mechanical assist device, compared to only 20% of the controls. On the basis of that, the FDA has actually funded a 159-patient trial using the same dose we're exploring in the phase 3 heart failure study in class 3 patients. So that trial will complete recruitment in the middle of this year and read out by the end of this year.
So that's important, especially with a study of that size. Is that something you could potentially take to the FDA to discuss registration?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the potential for a breakthrough designation, or now a RAT designation. But I think it also provides an additional assurance that perhaps, if needed, that could count as as a second trial, perhaps.
Yep. Excellent. Good point. So I want to switch gears to the recently approved product in Japan, Temcel. Now, this is actually a similar product in the U.S. You're developing it as MSC-100 IV. There are some differences. This is a mesenchymal stem cell product to treat GVHD. So maybe you can tell us about the approval in Japan and sort of about that partnership, and then also what's going on with respect to the phase 3 in the United States.
Sure. So Mesoblast is developing MSC-100 IV, which is a mesenchymal lineage cell for the treatment of steroid refractory graft-versus-host disease. As you mentioned, this product is already approved in both adults and children in Japan through our partner JCR Pharmaceuticals, and has been launched and is being sold. Now, this is a disease, graft-versus-host disease, that is basically a byproduct of trying to treat patients with blood cancers or leukemias. So you give high-dose chemotherapy that kills the cancer, but you have to reconstitute the immune system. When you get a bone marrow transplant, the more unrelated that bone marrow is, the higher the rate of or likelihood of developing graft-versus-host disease. It's extremely problematic in children. When it starts to attack the GI and liver, you only have a 15% survival rate at 100 days. So when we give our therapy, we are able to have about 2/3 of the patients respond and have over an 80% 100-day survival rate. We've now treated over 241 children through an expanded access program with these type of results. And the FDA has allowed us in the U.S. to do a 60-patient open-label study because it's unethical to randomize these kids to a control arm. And if we're able to demonstrate similar findings to what we showed in our expanded access program, we'll be in a position to file for marketing approval. Last November, we passed another important interim analysis assessing the primary endpoint of overall response at day 28, and we were able to successfully pass the futility interim analysis, and we believe we have a good likelihood of achieving a successful endpoint. We should read out this study, complete enrollment, and read out the end of this year, early next year.
Great, excellent, that's helpful. I want to talk about the DISC program, which is currently in a phase 3 trial as well. Maybe you can tell us about this product, how it's a little bit different first. Give us a sense of the phase 2 data and describe the phase 3 trial.
Yeah, first of all, the products we're working with, our underlying technology, is a really powerful technology that we're developing using mesenchymal lineage cells. And these cells are able to be grown into large numbers. They're pretty rare. They're normally responsible for regeneration repair in the body. We harvest them from the bone marrow. However, IP covers isolation of these cells from a variety of tissue sources. They could be propagated and be used allogeneically because they are not recognized as being foreign. They're immune privileged. And the way they work is they sense injury and respond accordingly. So they have a number of receptors for inflammation, for acidosis, hypoxia, and other disease markers, and then secrete factors in response to that. So what that allows us to do is really tackle the disease from multiple mechanisms of action. So the more advanced or the more sick the patient is, the greater the response. So that's why you see we're targeting the advanced stages of heart failure. We're targeting the advanced stages of chronic lower back pain here. And these are patients who have failed physical therapy, failed steroid injection. 60% of our patients in phase 2 were on opioids. Many of them are bedbound from pain. And what we're trying to show here is really to show an improvement in pain and function. And what we see here in this slide is that nearly 3 times as many treated patients are able to achieve a very high bar of a 50% improvement in pain and a 15-point improvement in functionality and not have any intervention, so no surgical orthopedic procedures. And these are patients with a median age of 45 years old, so they want to be contributors to society, but unfortunately with the pain, they're unable to be. So 3 times as many treating control patients, and what we wanted to also demonstrate is that this was a durable effect and it could be achieved in multiple time points. So we show here that this effect is achieved at both 6 months and 1 year, and as well as it's pronounced also at 24 months. And we just recently released results showing that nearly 82% of the patients that met the threshold at 24 months maintained it for 3 years. So a common theme is that a single administration of our therapy seems to allow for durable and long-lasting effects.
That's really great. Now, both of these programs are part of a discussion that you're having with Mallinckrodt presently. So maybe you can tell us what's on the table here and why is Mallinckrodt the right partner for these programs?
Sure. Mallinckrodt is a hospital-based pharmaceutical company with about $3 billion in revenue. They are committed to regenerative medicine. They recently bought a company called Stratotech using keratinocytes for burn repairs. And we believe that they have the capability. They're in the spaces that we're targeting for pain, as well as our bone marrow transplant program for graft-versus-host disease. They have injectable Tylenol. They sell opioids. Their Theracos division has photopheresis, which is in the transplant centers. And I think we're going to be important to them. I think the benefit of working with Mallinckrodt is they currently have 30%, greater than 30% of their revenues from a single product. So they really have to diversify. So far, the interactions have been very promising. They have a 9-month exclusive negotiation period, but we think that they're going to be a good fit for partner, and we're looking forward to hopefully executing on this transaction.
And just so we all can put it in our calendars, when is that 9-month? I think it was announced earlier this year, right?
Yeah, I believe it's around September.
Okay, great. So I was personally really impressed by the phase 2 data that you showed on MPC 300 IV in refractory rheumatoid arthritis. And I've made this comparison. I kind of feel like with the introduction of Enbrel and the biologics, we took sort of patients who were steroid refractory and really had no options and have just completely revolutionized rheumatoid arthritis, arguably creating one of the largest drug classes ever with the anti-TNFs, IL-6s, et cetera. I kind of saw this dramatic response in steroid and biologic refractory patients as very similar to the introduction of Enbrel back in 1999. So this is really game-changing data to me. Maybe you can walk us through the phase 2 trial design and the data, and what are the next steps for this program?
Sure, yeah, we also are very excited about the anti-inflammatory properties of our cells and the ability to treat diseases such as biologic refractory RA and diabetic nephropathy. We did a 48-patient randomized controlled study in patients who had failed a previous biologic, so an anti-TNF predominantly. And we followed patients for 3 months and recently released results for 9 months. Again, a single administration, intravenously delivered, exploring 2 different doses, 1 million cells per kilogram or 2 million cells per kilogram. And what we showed was some pretty impressive findings, in fact, demonstrates statistical significance for the very high bar of an ACR 70, which basically means that 70% of the joints, tender and swollen joints, have improved, and we've shown improvement statistically significant in disability index as well. It was most pronounced in the higher dose, and in fact, it was most pronounced in the patients who failed 1 to 2 biologics. When you look at 9 months, the effect was durable, and the primary endpoint typically for approval is ACR 20, and as you can see in this slide, nearly 3 times as many treated patients compared to controls were able to demonstrate an impact in ACR 20. So we're very excited. This is a program that we're currently strategizing about how best to develop, whether we want to partner this or continue to develop it on our own.
And I think equally important, if you look at that, in placebo at week 39, ACR 50 and ACR 70 were 0. So no one responded. This is how severely refractory these patients are. And you had a third of patients, give or take, 30% of patients have an ACR 50 or 70. So that's what really caught my attention about this data.
Yeah, that's the goal, to really impact low disease activity and near remission-like outcomes. That's the unmet need.
We've got a minute left. I know Mesoblast recently completed a financing primarily in Australia. Where does the current cash stand, and how long will this fund the company?
As of last year, we had $55 million in cash. Last month, we recently raised $40 million, predominantly from existing shareholders throughout the UK, Hong Kong, and Australia, at a very nominal discount as well. And we think through the combination of that, plus we have access to a $90 million drawdown facility through an Australian institution, as well as non-dilutive funding, we are easily going to be in a position to get through to the first commercialization of one of our lead programs.
Great. It's really exciting. Michael, thank you so much for being here with us today.